Tyler here for a Requel podcast. Not a pitch today, just kind of some thoughts and reviews as I drive in the car. This one's based on Salems Lot. First off the gate, I've never read the book. I've read about the book, and I've listened to in-depth book reviews, and I want to read the book. My problem is I don't have time to sit down and really read a novel, and I've thought about doing an audiobook, and I might go that way. I always think about when I'm reading things in a movie, and sometimes with novels, they're not paced like that, so I get lost, and the pacings can be so odd and off. But yet I do like the rich history and backstory and depth that a novel goes. It's a conundrum. So I have been listening to some reviews from some podcasts I really like and a series, and they've done the book Salem's Lot, and they've done the 3 versions, with the newest one having recently come out on Max as a Max original. And all I can really pull to is this story. I wish that the newest one had come out 2 years ago or hadn't come out at all, because this is the story that is made for a streaming service. We've talked about how some stuff, especially a lot of the Marvel things, feel like their TV shows are a movie that just keeps getting chopped up, and there's no really beginning, middle, and end. You're just watching a segment. It reminds me of being in elementary school when we would watch a film and the bell would ring and they just pause it, and then the next day we'd back it up a little bit and play it from where we left off. That's what those feel like sometimes. Like, just edit it together as a movie and stop chopping it up as a series. And I feel like to properly do Salem's Lot, you need to do it on a streamer. It needs about a good probably 8 hours to really dive into the book, develop things. The newest film, though, even with the screenplay as streamlined as it is, being that it originally was filmed right after movies were being opened up after COVID, you can feel that in some of the positioning and the shots and everything. But I feel like to really feel the terror and the horror that the book brings about of the town and really make it about the town, you need time. We need time to meet these characters. To be Ben Mears, to get there and to maneuver and start to learn this town, this history, as he starts to write his book. And a streamer can take its time and start planting seeds and give us the history, so that when we start to get great scenes of everybody in the town as a vampire, we feel sad and hurt and sickened, because these people that we've got to know and experience their life with and be with them and see who they are now dead. And I think that's the biggest takeaway from the new film, is I didn't get to really know anybody. It was like box check, box check, box checked. And the only character I really come out liking is Mark Petrie, because that kid's going to have some therapy issues in the future. It would be interesting to make it set in modern time, but at the same time, the town always feels like it's slightly behind the times. Or if you wanted to update it somewhat, set it in the 90s. Right at the peak where you have characters like Crockett, who has money, who has a cell phone. Nobody else does. Something like that. I feel that each version has done a unique job of taking the story and putting their own twists and turns and a little bit different, and pulling different elements from the book. Now, I believe the book is without its issues, but I still think that you can get a really great miniseries that really dives into what it is to be a town that is now polluted and overrun with evil. But here's a question. what's the point of making everyone in the town a vampire? What theory is, we see that they're all made to serve the master, which is Barlow. Now, if the new vampires turn somebody, are they diminished, in any way compared to if Barlow turns you? If he makes the whole town vampires, that's a lot of vampires, but killing and feeding out the town and some people coming back as vampires is interesting. If everyone comes back, it's like a whole town that's vampires. So where do they go from there? Right? And of course, the new Salem lot has a really interesting scene and how they get rid of the vampires and things. So it's a story, I think, that it's like it keeps wanting to be told, but it can't find its footing. And sadly, with this newest version, that means we're looking at probably another 10 to 20 years before we could see a version again. We have one in the 70s, one in 2004, one now in 2024. So, 20 years later. Which is still crazy to even say that out loud. The other thing I think is with the Barlow conundrum is you have two versions that make him this giant master vampire that looks like the imagery has been there, but he looks Nosferatu-like. And then you have one where he looks human. And my case is you make him both, right? You do scenes with him as this human-looking vampire guy who's moving around people, and he's seen or he's introduced at night, and people kind of communicate with him. And then you have scenes where he starts to take more of his monstrous vampiric form and what that looks like to him. If he's supposed to have, shape-shifting type abilities or whatever, having more of his vampire features. He's supposed to be the most powerful, much like Dracula, where I always think that Dracula's vampire powers are a little bit more different than those that he turns and makes into a vampire. But I don't know, I just think the idea of the small town overrun by vampires, and it's just a slow kind of disease and that's going on, is interesting. But it's, you got to deconstruct the town, but you have to build it first. And I mean, you could even pay homage to, a few years ago, there was the Chapelwaite TV series that was based off the short story Jerusalem's Lot. And it was creepy. It had Adrian Brody in it. And you could tie a little bit more of that short story with the Salem's Lot miniseries, connecting the history of Jerusalem's Lot, and then why people nicknamed it, Salem's Lot and everything. So, I don't know. Just some thoughts. You thought you were done with me. One more thought on Salem's Lot. This was one of those movies that was up on Warner Brothers' chopping block for deletion. And I can't believe that's even a thing, that you make a movie, you film it, and then you just delete it for a tax write-off. They did that to Acme, a Looney Tunes film, and they did that to Batgirl. I think Batgirl was the biggest controversy because you had Brendan Fraser, who had just won an Academy Award. You had Michael Keaton back. You had a character that had never had her own film. You had two really, I guess, hip and modern directors who had success with the last two Bad Boys films. And they had done some TV work. The first episode of Miss Marvel, and I cannot properly pronounce their names. I don't want to butcher them out of respect. And they had done something else that's not coming to me right now. It'll probably come to me later. And they have a style. So there's no way that you're telling me this was not a good film in any set. And on those other, I wish that Salem's Lot had been deleted and Batgirl made, not just because I'm a DC fan, but because I would have then developed Salem's Lot for HBO. Brought back the director if you wanted to, because I think Salem's Lot 2024 is beautiful to look at, and has some really cool imagery. Meanwhile, I'm driving right now through backwoods, just fall foliage. But I once again, I would have done that and then built that up for a TV miniseries, like on HBO. Like, not HBO Max, we know there's a difference, but on HBO's, and brought that big creativeness to it that the story really needed. So I guess that'll be my final thought. P.S. kind of note here. Done a lot of pitches about the monsters and the vampires this year because Ginny and I revisit a lot of Dracula and classic works and had these discussions. And with this year having the new Salem's Lot, Abigail, recently last year was Last Voyage of the Demeter, Renfield, and then coming soon is Nosferatu. And I'm probably missing one in there somewhere, maybe. It's just been in discussions. And the one thing that always bothers me in any vampire-based movie is establishing the lore. You always have scenes of people pulling out books or going to the websites, and finding stuff online. And I always like when you can play around with the idea that some stuff works and some stuff doesn't, but where does it come from? What is the truth? That's one thing I really loved in the book for I Am Legend, which would love to see a really well done version of I Am Legend that's true to the book. The best one we have is the Vincent Price one. But establishing the lore where they go through almost a trial and error of learning what works, what doesn't work, why things work, why things don't work. And trying to do that successfully in any vampire film. If you can't establish the lore of not only what kills them, what affects them, how they have to live, like in their coffin, because they have to be in the dirt that they were buried in, the fact that they need to be buried and rise from where they were buried to be a vampire, or the idea that they have to ingest vampire blood in them before they die to come back, or they just get bit and they turn, or they have to be bit and drained and die of being bit. There are so many variations on how to actually turn somebody and what that process looks like. And I feel much like in this recent version of Salem's Lot, they don't establish what is the means well enough. We have characters who seems like that they die and then come back. We have characters that seem like they're bit and then quickly turn. So what is the process? And I know Dracula has always been like the big one. So we always pull from there. But there's a lot in that about what vampires can and can't do and what their abilities are. And I think you really got to find a way to establish the rules of your unique universe anytime you do a film.